And what do you think about Mike McCarthy now being out there, and the Bears have him on their list? They tried to interview him, and Dan's shaking his head ferociously. For those of you not on Twitch, YouTube, or wherever else you might be watching,
no, they have expressed interest at every turn here so far. Mike McCarthy would be an upgrade for the Bears. It does feel like there's more intriguing candidates available here, but if they're just in the process of due diligence, covering all bases, those sorts of things, would I take Mike McCarthy over some dude I've never heard of who's never done the gig before? Probably, and he would certainly be an upgrade over Matt Eberflus as a head coach. He's had a lot of success over the years. He's won a Super Bowl, but it feels like
that can't be the standard.
Right.
Better than Eberflus is a loser's standard.
It really is. I'm in complete agreement.
You can't be Kevin Warren and be like, this is the most sought after. As long as it's better than Eberflus, we're fine. Come on.
The way that this job could go for the Bears with the salary cap space that's available, with the roster, the accumulation of some talent that is here on the roster. You certainly want a deeper roster, but good thing is you've also got draft capital that's there. And yes, you do have this very talented quarterback who just finished a rookie season that's better than any rookie season any Bears quarterback has ever had. So it does feel like there should be an appeal to this role, an appeal to coming and taking over the Bears and nurturing those talents and having a GM that can continue to enhance this roster, where it should be appealing to a wide variety of coaching candidates. And I was saying this to Rami Makloff the other night, where I was on with Rami, and Rami's kind of a pro-McCarthy guy, was the vibe I got when we were talking here. And my thing is, we've seen the peak of Mike McCarthy. He's definitely an upgrade from Matt Eberflus, but it seems that we've seen his best days as a coach. And he peaked with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and he did for a while help to nurture, to grow, to develop the skills of Aaron Rodgers. Then things peaked. The game passed him by for a bit. To his credit, he stepped away and reportedly kind of, tried to modernize his approach to offense in the National Football League. And he's had some good moments in Dallas, but it peaks on a consistent basis, and a lot of it tends to point back to Mike McCarthy, whether it is clock management, timeout issues, the imbalance of his offense at times. So there's understandable concerns, and he got another big job in Dallas, and he has flamed out again with a very talented quarterback. So I think between Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott, Mike McCarthy sits in an interview and he can say, I've been with two guys who were very young at the time I was with them and turned them into the best version of themselves. So the Bears could look at that and point it to Caleb and say, all right, this is a guy who is at least, more so than a number of other guys who get, like John Gruden gets credited as QB guru guy. We've never seen evidence that John Gruden has actually nurtured and developed a young quarterback. Mike McCarthy can say that, but you would think there's more intriguing candidates there.
Wow. It also tells me Jerry Jones doesn't do this without
a plan,
having somebody. So what I'm wondering is, between now and 5 o'clock, do they announce they've interviewed Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton? and then he hires Ben Johnson.
Yeah, listen, and let me tell you something. If that happens,
he's not allowed to hire Ben Johnson yet, though, right?
He's not allowed to be hired. But they could have a handshake deal. They could be like, when the season's over, you're my guy. I'm paying you all the money, because he can do that. He can do that. He's Jerry Jones.
We know Jerry Jones doesn't care about that. And this is where, and I'd love to get you guys' take on this, because I've had so many people asking me about the financial constraints of the Bears gig and whether or not money would be some sort of a deterrent for the Bears in pursuit of the head coach. And I don't know that there's a lot of evidence to that.
I haven't heard that at all. The Bears have been spending money hand over fist in the last 2 calendar years.
That's my impression.
They've been spending incredible amounts of money.
But isn't that more stadium based?
It's also front
facilities
office.
over there at Hallis Hall.
The business side. How many $500,000 a year people has Kevin Warren hired? 10?
Several people making good salaries to be. When you have VP, whether it's E or SVP.
Yeah. What do you think that pays?
It pays.
So they've boned up infrastructure. So then if we agree on that, then through that lens, is money going to be enough to assume the Bears wouldn't get Ben Johnson based off that? If Jerry Jones says, I'm going to pay you $15 million a year, then why wouldn't Kevin Warren and the Bears be able to step in and say, we'll pay you $15 million in one and you get Caleb? I mean, like it just in comparing apples to apples, I don't think there would be necessarily a handshake deal in place with Jerry Jones. And if there's any concern that Ben Johnson would have about working with Ryan Poles, how do you think he'd feel about having an answer to Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones? Like, that's not something he can't just bring in some other powerful, personnel guy with him when he's going to Dallas if that's the desire.
As stubborn as Jerry Jones has proven to be over the course of his lifetime, there is evidence that he has softened up on some things. You can look at what he's decided to do with his Ring of Honor, and finally the coach that won the titles is a part of that now. That's a big one where he was like, no, it's not as important as everybody tries to make him out to be. No, he recanted on that. And I think as he gets later in life, because he is later in life, he'd be willing to, hey, if I talk to Ben Johnson and he tells me this is what we need, I can work with him on that.
The one thing Jerry has never seemingly budged on is to give up personnel control.
Now, I'm not saying he would give up personnel control, but I think the discussions in earnest with the next head coach, if he wants to win, he has to admit to himself, what I've been doing is not working. He has to do some self-reflection in that standpoint. And that might be, to be honest, one of the reasons why Mike McCarthy and him have come to a head in that in his eyes, McCarthy didn't do a good enough job as far as playoff success to justify him paying all that money.
Back during the offseason, I kind of did this deep dive on some of the franchises around the sport that have been able to maintain a certain degree of success regardless of who their quarterback has been. And we're talking this entire century, regardless of quarterback, regardless of coach in some cases. There are just certain teams, like Tampa Bay has sustained success far beyond what the Bears have throughout this century. The Minnesota Vikings have been more consistently successful through various coaches and quarterbacks than the Bears have. The Dallas Cowboys are one of these teams that consistently goes for it over and over again. And I did this kind of deep dive just through the lens of whether or not moving on from Justin Fields was just sort of this easy answer that it seemed to be presenting as like, all right, you move on for the quarterback and you get this other dude and everything's all gravy. As we have now seen through the rookie season of Caleb Williams, getting the number one QB doesn't make it all gravy. So the credit I'll give to Jerry Jones and the Cowboys is that we rarely, if ever, see them in tear down mode, rebuild mode. Somehow they massage the salary cap, they spend money, and they can. It's not always successful, but you never hear Jerry Jones saying, we're going to go into quote unquote rebuild mode. Even without using that word, we know what the Bears were doing a couple of years ago as they were tearing down the roster and trying to build back up towards getting the number one overall pick, having salary cap space to spend. There are certain teams, Pittsburgh is just in it every single year without having to go through some kind of a tear down. So as far as just kind of comparing with this Mike McCarthy news that you guys just mentioned, in comparing the situations, I think a lot is advantage Bears, but just through the lens of who feels like they're in it on an annual basis, and Dak Prescott is already a proven commodity as a quarterback, that is a situation Ben Johnson can look at and say, I got an ownership group that's in it to win it every year, and I've got a quarterback who maybe I can take him just another notch above where he is and do something really big.
I just can't wait. I'll say at some point within the next 2 hours, there will be a tweet from a national reporter mentioning that Deion Sanders is interested.
Oh, absolutely. In the I told you that was guaranteed, right, Ant?
If nothing else, the Cowboys will very likely say they're interested in Deion.
But Deion will float it immediately. I would say Deion is going to put that in the bloodstream immediately.
Yeah, I mean, someone will. They both love headlines. Deion loves headlines. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys love headlines. So from that perspective, it's a match made in heaven. Now, even if neither one of them in the end truly has an interest in working with the other or working for the other or feels like that partnership would just blow up, they will milk it. They're going to get every ounce of headline and media churn out of that than they can. Yep. And then in the end, maybe Jerry Jones still hires some other coach who he feels like he can control more than he can control Deion. And maybe Deion just says, you know what, I'm going to re-up and get another deal out of Colorado. Just get a new extension from Buffs or something like that.
Hey, the hustle is real. The grind, that's sold separately.
Speaking of hustle, Ray Diaz has yet to remove the X out of Mike McCarthy on line 10. I think you got to. He's back on now, right?
Yeah, he's definitely in the mix. Right, I would say this: the Saints are also heavily interested in Mike McCarthy's services as well.
Perfect
so
spot for
that might work out with Dan. But going back to the larger picture, And are you satisfied with how this search is being conducted so far?
So far, because no one can hire Ben Johnson yet, and so Mike Vrabel is out of the mix, and you lose Mike Vrabel to his alma mater.
Yeah,
basically.
we knew what that was. We all knew.
Like if Ryan Day got fired at Ohio State and they hired Mike Vrabel, could other college football programs really be upset? Hey, he's going back home essentially. So you get that. Ben Johnson is the next big ledger, the next big lever that could be pulled from a coaching perspective, but he's not available yet. So the Bears just kind of continuing to do their homework and interview folks until they make a final decision. I'm all about collecting information. I'm all about collecting data and meeting people and doing due diligence. And the Bears, I would say for the most part, have done that in the past and always got this wrong. So it doesn't guarantee him a thing. But, basically every coach since Levy, you had the one division title with Matt Nagy. But aside from that, man, they get this wrong over and over again with the coach and until further notice with the GM. But they do seem to procedurally try to get to a good place, and then they miss. Why are they missing? Are they missing because the infrastructure hasn't been in place from an executive personnel? All right, they're trying to bone up the executive personnel. Does the franchise itself not seem desirable enough because they don't operate as a first-class organization? All right, let's fly the coaches first class for the first time ever. You know what we also want to do? We want to get better facilities over there at Hallis Hall. So free agents come here and feel like they're going to be treated well and have the best to work with. There are things behind the scenes. There are things that the players feel and that the executives are around that they've tried to enhance, and they have enhanced. In the end, it hasn't led to results on the field. But to go through this process in the way that they are right now, I dig it because I don't want to feel like decisions are made rashly. And they're certainly not being rash with this decision right now. They're talking to a whole bunch of folks. Hopefully it gets them turned in a point in this process where they actually get it right this time.
No, they got a whole bunch of folks talking to a whole bunch of folks, and that was what Dave Wanstedt was mentioning today. And Anthony, I said that for Dave to say what he said, it's clear it's not just his thought because he talks to everybody, and he must be hearing it about what's happening around the league with the way the Bears have handled business so far.
That's a fair assessment. Wani knows everybody. Wani talks to everybody. And as coaches are going through this process, if it is someone, especially if it's someone who's been around the block, who's gone through these interviews for a head coaching role before, and if it feels different or unique than what they've experienced in the past, then that could be something that stands out about the Bears. I seriously doubt the Bears are alone in this approach, though. Like for Dallas, maybe it's just Jerry and Steven in the room and nobody else, but that's a little bit of a different structure. I don't really think the Bears are structurally designed that differently than most other organizations. There's plenty of teams around the league that above their head coach have a general manager and a team president who answers to a team owner. How many folks need to be on a Zoom? How many folks need to be in a room? You know what? For whatever reason, you had multiple assistant coaches that had to get fired for, reportedly, seemingly, possibly tawdry reasons. You can't leave those stones unturned at this point either. So it can't just be Ryan Poles in a room talking football with the next Bears head coach, especially after what has happened of recent vintage here with the reasons some other employees have had to be let go. If they're talking, and they've said publicly that their operation is going to be first class, they're going to make sure they don't make these same mistakes again, and they have high standards. And so when somebody comes in and they need to meet high standards, go ahead and have somebody related to HR in the room as well, who, some other group has done a background check. Somebody's got to ask the coach a few tough questions about his hiring procedures and, maybe some difficult storyline that's been out there in his past. So what? Then out of several hours in the day that a team is going to spend with a coach kind of interviewing them, at some point, put them in the room with just the football people and just talk football. But this job has expanded so much in its scope, in its reach, in who, gets kind of feels the influence of a head coach of a football organization. So, some of the other sort of flimsy periphery things that go into it, to me, that's just kind of a part of the modern process.